Howdy, everybody. You are listening, and for the first time ever watching, the Blue Jeans and Boots podcast brought to you by the Texas A&M Genetics and Genomics Graduate Program. Today, I will be hosting this episode. My name is Serina.
And I'm your another co-host, Khushboo.
And we're going to be talking to Michelle Jonika. Michelle is a fifth-year PhD student in the Genetics and Genomics program here at Texas A&M. She's in Dr. Heath Blackmon's lab, and her research focuses on sex chromosome evolution, and she's a bioinformatician to the nines, and we're very excited to have her today. Hi, Michelle.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm great. How are y'all?
Pretty good. Overall, I mean, nervous about being on camera, I'm not going to lie to you, but aside from that, we're doing great.
So the weather outside is also good.
The weather's decent. It's cold.
A little too cold out there for me, but personally,
No,
but
it's not cold. It's good for me.
Michelle,
yes.
can you tell us about your research?
Of course. So I study genome structure and sex chromosome evolution, as Serena said, in Heath Blackmon's lab. And we work on a whole variety of organisms. Our lab's predominantly driven by just answering really cool questions, and so whatever organism happens to serve that question best is what we'll use. And so I've gotten the opportunity to work on insects, to work on mammals, carnivores, just a whole host of different organisms that have really made it fun to learn about nature and science in general.
What would you say is your favorite of all of the different organisms?
I don't know. I probably prefer mammals. They're very charismatic. You can get a lot of buy-in from people because people love the big charismatic mammals that we work on. And they're just a very diverse group that I really enjoyed working on. And especially it's been my most recent work lately, so it's kind of close to my heart at the moment.
So you still plan to continue working with animals, or do you wish to change your field?
I don't know. I really am driven a lot by research that can just get me excited to get out of bed in the morning. And so it doesn't really matter to me, I guess, what it is, as long as it's an exciting question to answer and I can find joy in doing that for the work that I'm doing.
That's nice.
Because you worked at Bayer too, right? For a summer?
Yes, I did. Yeah. So 2 summers ago, I worked at Bayer Crop Science, so in their crop science division of the company, and I worked as a genomics discovery application intern. And so I got to work there and get to work on plants for the first time. I know y'all are both plant people. It was a little out of my comfort zone, but I got to work on plants for the first time, and they're another exciting organism that I got to add to my repertoire of things that I've been able to work on during grad school. And they're pretty cool. I don't know if I would ever work in plants again, but they were fun to work on for the summer.
I won't blame you. The genomes is a little hard to work with compared to the animal system. So.
Yes. I definitely have a lot of respect for y'all working in plants. It's a very different experience.
We appreciate that. Somebody understands our pain.
It's true. That makes sense. What kind of mammals have you been working on recently, or all mammals?
So recently I've been working on carnivores specifically. We're looking at chromosome number evolution in carnivores, and we just recently made a karyotype database for them. It has where you can use this interface to go through chromosome number and just look at all these different features of the carnivores. And it's going into a manuscript where we're looking at chromosome numbers and how they evolve in relation to binary traits that are proxies for effective population size. So.
That's so cool.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and so we're using different things like IUCN status and the range size of carnivores to look at how those traits evolve with chromosome number. So it's really fun, and getting to look at IUCN status and see all the cute little pictures of the carnivores as I'm going through. It's been a very rewarding paper to work on.
And this database is going to be open for other people to use?
Yes.
Is that the plan?
Yes.
Is there a name for it?
It's called karyotype.org. And so we host actually a lot of different databases there. So we have chromosome number databases for flies, there's insects, so just a whole lot of different organisms. We've tried to collect all of that information from across different books and literature and put it in this one open source database so that people can have this information readily available for them. They can do some cute little preliminary just graphing of some data that we have housed within that database, and so they can see initial patterns of some of the groups they're looking at. There's different drop downs within each of the groups where you could just look at a specific family or just look at a specific order of some of these groups that you're interested in. And so it's a very very, very awesome website that'll be open access and available for researchers.
So all your databases are interconnected, or for every fly or carnivorous animals, it's a different database you have?
So they're interconnected. It's just like the larger group will have separate databases. So there's not one with all of the information together, but like each of these different groups, so like carnivores and like Coleoptera, they're all separate. But then once you go into like carnivores, you can see all the carnivores that we do have information for. And then carnivores specifically will actually be a larger mammalian database. So I have about 1,500 chromosome numbers for mammals. Yes, it took quite a bit of time to collect that data, but it was fun.
Michelle's
you know?
grinning through the pain right now. Like,
You put on Netflix.
So you cannot complain about plants anymore now, you know. Having 1,500 chromosomes, we don't have 1,500 chromosomes in plants.
You put on your favorite show, get a good snack, and you just plug away at entering in that data. It's a fun time.
Would that be your general advice for bioinformaticians or aspiring bioinformaticians? Just put on Netflix, get yourself a snack, and get started?
I would say that's probably my ideal way to code. So a lot of people are like, oh, like bioinformaticians have a lot of screens. One of them is probably always going to be like streaming something or having Spotify on. You always gotta have like a good show or a good song on to work with. And then definitely you gotta have the snacks there too.
Yeah.
It's very easy when you're coding to just like grab for a snack or like grab for a drink. So definitely like making sure you're set up to have like a very good like coding session while you're sitting there.
Happy time.
Yeah.
How many screens do you have? Like 3-4 screens to work with, or just your?
So I actually had to reduce it because I felt like I wasn't being productive enough.
Michelle was distracted by the screen.
So I used to have my laptop screen and then 2 additional screens, but I've reduced it down to just the 1 additional screen of my laptop because there are times where you have a whole lot of real estate of laptop or like of your screens, and you just need to make sure that like you're not getting overwhelmed by things you think you should be doing because they're not being used. So.
That's an opposite. Usually I know bioinformatician, they up the screen numbers because they can spread out everything and work.
Yeah. It's also like a curse too though, because then like once I went up to an additional screen, I feel like I can't work on just a laptop now. And it could be something that totally like should be able to like do, you should be able to do it on a laptop, and I'm like, no, I need my second screen.
Yeah, I know. I cannot work on my laptop even to send an email. I need my additional screen. Although I won't use it, but I still feel there's something missing about it, and I need that part.
It's a comfort.
It's a comfort.
It just feels good having it there, even if you're not using it.
I feel so out of my league. I have 1 screen at my 1 desk at home. I have a screen at my desk at my computer at work. That's it. I'm a 1 screen girly.
If that works for you, like
It's like an addiction, you know. Once you start,
you can't stop.
You cannot stop. I got used to of having an additional screen, and I cannot work. I feel like I am partially non-functional without an additional screen. I cannot function. It's like really a bad addiction. Although 15 inch of a laptop, it's a good screen size, but doesn't work for me anymore.
Doesn't cut it.
Doesn't cut it anymore.
That's
You have
fair.
standards now.
Did you know how to code when you came into graduate school? Were you already a multi-screen girly, or did you come in and you were like, I'm learning?
I was not. So I did not know how to code prior to coming into grad school. And it's just, I don't know, it's so interesting to think back on, especially like, I feel like coding is emphasized a lot more in undergrad than when I was going through my undergraduate degree. And so I came into Dr. Blackmon's lab and I had no coding experience whatsoever. And it's really interesting looking back because the amount of like things I've taken in the last 4.5, 5 years, it's just incredible to think back on, coming from like the ground and building all of those skills up. And so no experience. I just had a PI who was very willing to walk that journey with me. Dr. Blackmon's an awesome teacher. He's very great at teaching people who have varying experience levels in coding, how to like take it to the next level or to get started. And so it was just a very good fit for me to join that lab with the experience or lack thereof that I had, and having him help walk me through that journey. And especially during my rotation with him, it was very apparent that I just had some different skills that were appropriate for entering into a bioinformatics space. So just being very tenacious when your code's having error messages, or just the way in which I approached some of the problems that I was faced with in coding. And so I think looking back, I really enjoy puzzles and like that, like the nature of just like solving like mysteries and puzzles. And I think that really helps me in my coding to approach it like a puzzle or like problem solving type of thing. And so I probably take a slightly different approach than someone who's been coding for quite a few years in their lifetime. But I think that I have different personality traits and skills that have helped me to really adapt to that type of work very well.
So I have a question for you. You said when you entered Dr. Blackmon's lab, you didn't had any coding experience. So what would you recommend an other graduate student who is willing to join any bioinformatics lab? So where to start from, where to look for the courses, and how to progress in this field?
Yeah. So I would say I'm probably a little bit rare in coming into a lab and that does bioinformatics work and not having that experience. Especially a lot of grad students that I see that are entering now that are first years, they've at least had like a bioinformatics class in their undergrad. And so I would say like at least having an introduction to bioinformatics, what coding is, the basic different structures that you're going to come across, so like for loops, different structures that you can store data in, maybe a little bit of like data munging and how to handle some of that messy data that we'll get sometimes. Just that preliminary stuff is going to be stuff you handle no matter what lab you're going into, no matter what program you're coding in. It's going to be things that are pretty similar across any coding language and probably any lab as well. And so just having that initial experience to know if it's something you would even like, because you don't want to think that's what you want to do and then end up there for 5 years and maybe it wasn't the best choice for you. And so it is a gamble if you're coming in with a little bit less experience in that type of thing, but at least having maybe a class introducing you to it, or if you ever have the opportunity to do like a LinkedIn course or a Coursera course, there's a lot of open source courses available for learning how to code, especially those like initial steps of like just learning data structures and stuff like that. There's things like Code Academy and other different programs that are out there that you can just look at different languages and maybe see if that's for you. And then if it is, I would say finding a lab where you feel comfortable in the skills that you're wanting to obtain during your time in grad school. I would choose based on that and how that person is going to mentor you through that experience, because everyone's different. Everyone's the way they do their research, the way they're going to code, that's all going to be different. And so really knowing what you want out of that experience, what they can give you in that experience, and how y'all are going to work together is probably most important.
That's resourceful.
Did you do research during undergrad? I forget.
I did.
And it wasn't bioinformatics, obviously.
It was not.
What did you do in undergrad?
So I was a forensic science major in undergrad, which was
the mysteries.
Very exciting, yes. So commonly on that second screen, I'll be watching a mystery show like NCIS or something like that. Something with a murder element to it, but not too much. I'm not into like any like, I can't do like horror scary movies, but I can do my crime solving shows. But in undergrad, I worked in Dr. Aaron Chirone's lab. He is in the Department of Entomology here at Texas A&M, and I worked on forensic genetics / entomology research. And so I worked on creating an assay that could identify the sex of immature blowfly larvae. And so it allowed us to be able to tighten time of death estimations when we have immature specimens that are located at crime scenes. And so it was a molecular-based assay that I was able to create for that project. It ended up being my undergraduate thesis project that's published with the university. And it was just really fun. I got to mix genetics, a little bit of insects, a little bit of forensics. It was just a little bit of everything. And it had a really great application in forensic science, which was fun and meaningful as well. So
this explains your future PhD program and your puzzle solving days and what things you love.
Yeah. It all came together.
It all makes sense. Full circle.
It's a full circle.
My next question was going to be how forensic science and entomology could be linked, but that makes a lot of sense, trying to calculate time of death.
Yeah, so there will be blowflies and other various insects that are present at crime scenes, and they can use those to help in time of death estimations. So it's a fun field.
Yeah, that's wild. Just wouldn't have thought. That's a creative way of trying to figure out a complex problem.
Yep.
I wouldn't have thought about it that way.
No, definitely not. And obviously you continued to some degree to work with insects.
Yes. I wouldn't identify myself as an entomologist per se. Insects are really great. They've been fun to work with, and they're very easy to be able to reduce like a lot of the paperwork with protocols and stuff, because we're not working with vertebrates or anything like that. And so they're just a very nice organism to work on. They're not going to bite you or I don't know.
Most of them.
Most of them, they don't.
Most of the ones I work on will not.
Okay, fair enough.
So they've been a fun organism and group to work with, but I would not consider myself an entomologist. But I've learned a lot about bugs in the last 6 to 8 years, more than I probably could have ever imagined, and so it's been a great time.
Currently, you're working with the beetles also, right?
Yes. So in my current lab, so we have tribolium beetles, which are a model organism in our lab. I don't work much with those, but I do work with a lot of gigantic beetles that we have. They're some of the world's largest beetles. Yes, so one of the ones, we have the world's largest beetle in our lab, a Goliath beetle. We got an adult about 3-4 weeks ago.
How big is it?
He is, I believe, like about 82 millimeters long. So he's quite large.
Okay.
His
good.
name is Scooby-Doo.
Scooby.
Yeah.
Why?
I am obsessed with Scooby-Doo, and when you leave a grad student to order your bugs for you, you get naming privileges.
Back to the mysteries. Michelle has been a mystery person her whole
entire
life.
life is mystery.
Yeah, and so we have an extra large male. His name's Scooby-Doo, and there are also 2 females. They're slightly smaller. They're only about 60 millimeters, and they are Velma and Daphne. So we got the whole gang in our lab.
Do you have a name for yourself as well in the lab?
No,
Just
no.
Michelle.
I'm not as cool as the Beatles are. We also have some other beetles as well. So we have Goliath beetles, which are also some very large charismatic beetles. And we're doing some genome sequencing right now on a lot of these giant beetles that we have in the lab. And so soon we will have a genome assembly for them. And so that'll be really exciting. And then we also have some really pretty charismatic beetles in the lab. They're called Chrysina beetles. There's 4 species of them, and they're these very pretty green metallic beetles. And sometimes we'll go out and do field work to collect them out in Arizona and New Mexico and the Sky Islands. And so that's been a fun part of the research in the lab as well, is getting to do some field work aspects to some of the research we'll do.
Yeah. It's kind of nice you get a little bit of both, like you sit at your multiple computer screens and do your coding, and then also go outside and
work.
Yeah.
Even the bioinformaticians have to get out of the lab sometimes.
They should.
And okay, remind me, you've told me before, how do you catch the beetles?
Yes.
Okay, so different beetles we catch different ways. So we don't have any tiger beetles currently in the lab other than sitting in some ethanol. So we're not keeping any live specimens of them. But those, you will go out onto little playas of sand. So there's a playa in Arizona where you can find them, and you get a little sweep net. So if they're in a large group, like swarming around, you can just like sweep net to pick them up out of the air. But if they are running on the ground, which is what they're usually doing, they're one of the fastest bugs in the world. They run very quickly. They run so fast that their eyes can't perceive like where they're at in space because they're going so fast. So they have to they'll run really fast and they have to stop and then catch up with where they were at, and they'll start running again.
That's wild.
Yeah, and so sometimes you'll have to catch them by taking a net and then just slapping it over the beetle to catch it. So those are a more fun time out of the beetles.
I had a flashback to Tom and Jerry type cartoons where they have a big net and it's just And that's literally what you do to catch the beetle.
Yeah.
Alright.
So you get your exercise also done running after them.
Yeah, it's a fun time. An easier way to catch them is sometimes if we're going to be out there longer, we can stick buckets in the ground and they can fall into them.
That's innovative.
Yeah.
Also sounds like something out of a cartoon, like run, and then suddenly they like pause midair, look down, realize they're about to drop, and then it goes pew.
And they're like, oh no, what's happening? But some of the ones I have a little more experience collecting. So the Chrysina beetles are predominantly what we've done our field work on. It wasn't a project that I personally worked on for my dissertation research, but we collectively helped collect for them in the lab for a few other projects that we have. So those Chrysina we catch at night, and so we'll set up our lights around when the sun's setting, and you have to be at a certain elevation. There's specific trees that they will be associated with, and so we'll have to be up at a certain elevation to where those trees are prominent, and then we'll set up around sunset, and we'll turn our lights on so they'll get like situated to be like, oh, there's a light over there, and they'll usually start to congregate around some of the trees like near the area, and then as it starts getting dark outside, we'll have these just like a normal bed sheet probably is probably the closest to what it looks like, and we can use that, but we'll have some special ones that we bought for collecting insects, where we can wrap some strings through it and tie it between two trees, and then we'll put different lights on them. And so sometimes we have these brighter lights that are obviously going to attract a little more bugs, and we'll have, if we're traveling and we're not driving there but we're flying, we'll have some smaller lights that we'll bring out that can fit in our suitcases, but we'll put lights on top of these sheets, and the bugs will be attracted to those lights. And then the bugs we specifically are looking at will generally like fly around the area, not as often going to the sheet, but sometimes they will. And so we'll have to not only look at the sheet, but also be looking around the area to see if they're landing on like some of the vegetation around where we set up our campsite. But it's really nice because they're very shiny and green metallic, and so they usually will catch your eye, and they have a very distinct flying pattern, so you can hear when they're flying by you that they're probably near. And so it's a really fun time, very good bonding experience to be out collecting in the middle of the night in the woods. And so it's a fun time. We'll usually collect until about, I don't know, if we're having a good night, like midnight, 1 a.m., and then we'll go to IHOP afterwards or do something fun. You know.
You do.
How many days your expedition is to get the beetles?
It just depends. So, my second summer in grad school, actually it might have been my first summer. Yeah, we went on about a 2.5 week trip, and so we drove from College Station all the way to southeastern Arizona and back, and so we just stopped at different locations along the way, and yeah, it's a fun time. We sprinkled in some different visits along the way, so we stopped at Carlsbad Caverns, we went to, what's the name of that national park with the sand in New Mexico? I can't remember.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of sand, right? Sand dunes?
Yeah, it's like
National
sand dunes.
Park?
Oh, I
Maybe.
can't remember. Oh.
But you stopped at a national park. It was
Yeah.
like a road
In
trip.
New Mexico, right?
Yeah,
It's a scientific
yeah, we
road
stopped
trip.
at a national park, and then we stopped in Roswell.
Okay,
Went to
of
the
course.
Alien Museum. It was a fun time. So as long as you're having a little bit of fun along the way, it doesn't feel like too much like work
Yeah.
while you're in the moment. So.
And you said, so you've been working on bugs, advertently or inadvertently, for 6 to 8 years. That's because you did undergrad here,
Mhm.
too. How was that transition between undergrad and grad school? I mean, you stayed in the same place, but obviously there's still a big transition between undergrad and grad school.
Yeah. So it's a very different experience, especially the classwork you take in undergrad while you're doing research is a little more, I would say, intense, because it's very much so important when you're an undergrad to really be focusing on your education. You can't move on to grad school if you don't get through your undergrad degree, and so very much so focusing on the academics part of that, and then like research as like a side project almost. Is how I viewed it, and so I feel like when you transition into grad school, it's almost like your academics and your research are equal, or even like research is slightly more important than your academics. Like you do need to be learning and taking in knowledge, but really also progressing your research and where your dissertation is going is important too. And I think that time management difference between all of the stuff you're doing in undergrad research and academics versus grad school academics and research is a little different. And it's a transition that you're going to have to get comfortable with. It's a very different take on like how classwork goes and how that research goes. And so you kind of take about a year or two to transition into just really understanding how that process is going to be like in grad school. But yeah, even though I did my undergrad degree here, I'm in a different department. I have a different professor, obviously. And so it's a very different experience. I'm getting to network with different people than I did in my undergrad degree. And so it's just opened me up to a lot of different experiences than I had in undergrad. But still having the comfort of like knowing people that I had as mentors while I was here, and still being able to connect with them as well. And so I think it's not as important knowing that I wanted to go in industry, that I really needed to branch out to a different university. It is great to always branch out to new universities to get new experiences, opportunities, to meet more people, but I didn't think it was critical, and I had a really great opportunity to go to grad school here, and so I took it.
And we're happy to have you.
You mentioned like you had a good balance of your time management, so I know that you did 2 internships, I assume?
Yes.
Yes. So how did you apply for it? When did you apply? And how was your overall experience about it?
Yes, yeah. So I did 2 very different internship experiences. So I did my first internship at Bayer, which is a very large international biotech company. So they had their application process slightly earlier than you may see some of the smaller companies come out with their applications. And so I applied to that internship. I believe it was around the beginning of November or end of October. And then I went through an initial phone screen for that. And then I did a very long 3.5-4 hour interview block. And so it was transitioning between different interviews with different sets of people. And then I also gave essentially like a seminar presentation of my dissertation work. And it was, so the exact title of my internship was a genomics discovery and application intern. It was really, so that was the team I was working on, was the genomics discovery application team. But essentially what I did with them was bioinformatics data science. And so I really focused heavily in that seminar presentation on a lot of the different software I've gotten a chance to work on and produce during my dissertation research. And so that was around the like October, November time. And then like just at the beginning of December, I had an initial and final offer in hand for the internship, not starting until next June. So very early on that I knew I was already going to be having that experience the summer after. And then this past summer, I worked at PetDX, which is a startup company. And so their application opened a little later in like the application season for summer internships. And I say later, but it was still pretty early. So it was around January. And so I had that final offer around February for the internship starting in June of that summer. And so depending on what type of companies you're applying for, they're going to have openings for their applications at different times. It generally trends that some of those larger companies are going to have them open up in the fall prior to that summer you're applying. Sometimes it can almost be like right after the summer ends, they're already opening applications for the next summer. And I think that's just because they have a lot more interns that they're hiring on, a much more extensive process for paperwork and HR and everything. And so they really want to get all of that solidified and squared away very early on. And then some of the smaller companies or your startup companies are going to have those applications open up a little later. And there's obviously exceptions to this, but that's generally how I see like the trends of when those applications will open.
So how long does it take once you send the application to get a reply back from a big company or a small company?
Yeah, so it can vary. So for my first internship, I got a reply back in about 2 days. And then for my second internship, I got a reply back in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. So it varies. And I think that's also going to be dependent on too. So that first one I applied to, I applied almost like right when the deadline was for the application, and so they were close to closing that like application, and so I think that's why I got a quicker response, whereas I applied to the other one I think a few days after I saw it posted, and so they probably waited a little longer before contacting people just to see the applicants they got in, to see who they wanted to initially screen. So I think it'll just depend on where they're at in that application process, but it's also okay too to always message whoever the recruiter is in charge of that application to see like, hey, like maybe do you have a timeline on how this application is going, or could you just check to see like where my application's at, especially if you have other offers and you're just wanting to check in. They definitely would not mind at all if you reached out to them. So
just as much as you're respecting their time by getting your application on time, they're respecting yours by giving you an answer about whether or not you're going to move forward.
Exactly.
Do you feel like, obviously, I'm sure Michelle enjoyed both of her internship experiences very much, but do you have any preferences after having done both experiences, or things that you learned maybe about what you're looking for in a work environment after graduate school based on the experiences you had?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest lesson I took away is that I think I could work in a very like diverse array of different experiences. So both of my internships happened to be remote. So the first one happened at the start of the pandemic, and so that one happened to be remote. And then the second one also was while the pandemic was still ongoing, so that one was remote again. And so I didn't necessarily get to work in the different headquarter locations of both of those companies, but I did get a very good taste of how it is to work remote, which is very different than us getting to come into the research lab daily and get to like socialize and do work and stuff.
Right.
And so it's just a very different experience, and I wasn't sure if I was going to like it or not. And so being a bioinformatician, I do work from different places sometimes. I'll work from coffee shops, or I will work from home, but I've never done it full time for an extended period of time. And so it was very nice to be able to see what that would be like, to see if that's something that was feasible for me in the future. And while I do think maybe like my ideal work situation would be hybrid, just because I do like having my social time in the office, getting to collaborate and stuff like that, I really do enjoy getting to work at home sometimes too. And so ideal hybrid would probably be my answer, but I'm very open to anything. I feel like the nature of my work really opens up a lot of possibilities for me as far as like types of work in the future. And I really enjoyed both of my experiences. They were great. I got to work with incredible mentors, just work on very different things that I've been able to acquire during my PhD. So they all code in different types of systems with different languages. I have mentors who just have different coding styles. And so it was just two wonderful opportunities to just pick up a lot of different skills that I may not have been able to attain during my PhD otherwise. I will say I did not know at first if I was going to enjoy working at a smaller company. And while I'm not the most extroverted person, I was a little initially concerned like how big the team was going to be, and how much like time you would get to like collaborate with your team and get that social interaction. And I ended up absolutely loving working at a smaller company, which was something so unexpected when I went into that experience. I mean, I knew I might enjoy it, but I didn't know like quite how much I was going to enjoy working in a smaller team. And there is like benefits to working in a larger company and a smaller company. But I really did. That was probably one of the most unexpected things that came out of my internship experience. Was I didn't know how I was gonna like a smaller company, but it was a startup company, so it was very fast paced, and there was just a lot of like excitement in the projects we were working on in that team, and it was just a very fun environment to be able to work in, and I ended up absolutely loving that experience. So
yeah, it's almost like getting into coding for the first time. You have to kind of try out different things and see what you like. I guess the same can be said for molecular biology. Like anything that you do, you kind of have to like dip your toes in, see what works for you.
Yeah, before you just like jump face first.
So how is the expectation when it comes to an internship? So the bigger companies, do they have higher expectations, or you're required to complete the project you are being assigned, or you could leave it in between since the time period is short?
Yeah, so these internships are about 12 weeks.
Yeah.
And so I just recently lectured in a class on this. It was about internship experience, and I was like, you go into it, and they have projects for you. Like, they have this plan of different things, different projects you're going to work on, and the expected time scale of like when all of those deadlines might be met, and they'll try to have a lot of the data files already available for you, and like ready so you can jump right in when you get into the company. Realistically, with everything in science, like there's going to be some things along the way that just do not go as planned, or you're going to be trying to get access to some system you need to work in for 2 weeks, and that's just going to delay you, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. And so it's something that you work through, and maybe you'll work on a side project along the way.
Right, okay.
You're always learning in these experiences. And so I will say that both of the projects that I was given to work on in both of the companies, they didn't come to a nice like tied completion, but there was much progress that was done on both of them. And so I think as much as it is an experience where you're trying to get this pick up these skills and get this experience in that project, you're also just learning. It's to learn. And that company is making good connections with the university you're coming from. They're making good connections with you. Anyone that you network with, you tell them about that opportunity. They have a very good outlook on that company, and so it's great for them. They get to have some of these people that are your mentors get that experience and training, these PhD students that are coming in to do these internships. And so it's just beneficial for everyone all around. And so I would say the goal of that interaction is predominantly networking, and then also being able to acquire skills and just take in a lot of knowledge. And if you do get to complete that project, like that's great. That is like awesome, wonderful, and especially in such like a short time scale. But the likelihood of that, you're always optimistic when you start out, and then you can just see the chances dropping as that summer goes on. And that just could be like the scope expands too. So it's not always that something went wrong. Maybe you're finding new and exciting things as you go along, and the scope expands too, and it's a much larger project than you initially thought you were taking on. And so there's just a lot of things that can happen in 12 weeks, and it's exciting, and you get through it together with your mentor and your team, and you just have a fun summer.
Sounds very exciting.
Yeah. To sort of close things off, Michelle, is there any piece of advice that you wish you had heard when you either started graduate school, when you were looking at internships, when you were rotating? Some words of wisdom to leave us off on.
Us and other grad students.
Yeah, so I would say I would definitely, the biggest piece of advice I think I could give people is to really take opportunities, even if they're going to get you out of your comfort zone. So there's going to be things that come up in your life, and you're not going to know how they might relate to your future career goals at the time, or you're going to be like, oh, I don't know if I really want to do this. I would say like 9 times out of 10, it comes back around and is like a great thing that you could have done for yourself. It gives you some skill or some like benefit that you can use in the future for where you're wanting to go. And so I really just say like take all those opportunities, and just really get out of your comfort zone. So even if you think that opportunity is like a really uncomfortable thing, like it's not maybe the most in line with like your personality or something, if it's going to get you out of your comfort zone, it still may be beneficial to you in the future. And you have to get uncomfortable to grow too. Yeah. And so really just making sure you make the most out of some of the experiences you're given in your PhD, and that you can grow as much as you can in those 4 or 5 years that you're in that time. Just really make sure you grow as a scientist, as a person, and take all those opportunities, even if you can't directly see how they're maybe relating to where you want to be. I would say that's the best advice I can give. There's so many things that I've done previously that I look back on and I'm like, wow, like if I knew 6 years ago that this opportunity I took would have helped me to have like domain knowledge in this specific area, like I would have been like, no, like this is just a fun like undergrad job to have. Yeah. And now it's like very relevant to something that I need experience on. And so yeah, just taking as many opportunities as you can to learn things, take in knowledge, and to just really get out of your comfort zone and grow and become a better scientist and a better person.
That's a good advice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Be out of your comfort zone.
Well, thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming today and talking with us.
Thank y'all so much for having me.
It was wonderful to talk to you and listen to you.
And like I said at the beginning, my name is Serina.
My name is Khushboo.
We've been your hosts today. This episode was produced by Erin DeSalvio. And if you have any questions, concerns, comments about the podcast, please feel free to email us at bluejeansandboots@gmail.com. Follow us on social media. And this podcast is brought to you by the TAMU Interdisciplinary Graduate Program in Genetics and Genomics. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.